The city of the Imperium lay shrouded in a pale, sickly light, the spires of its Gothic architecture clawing at a sky bruised with unnatural clouds. Cobblestone streets glimmered wet under early morning mist, carrying the faint scent of incense and iron, a reminder of both faith and war. Merchants prepared their stalls, oblivious to the subtle tension lurking in the air, while children ran past gargoyle statues, their laughter echoing in alleys that seemed too quiet, too still. The Sisters of Battle patrolled the streets with immaculate precision, their ceramite armor reflecting the dim light like cold steel mirrors. Bolters hung ready, flamers primed, and eyes scanning every shadow as is expecting death to rise from the stones themselves. Sister Superior, the protagonist, moved among them, her steps measured, her expression unreadable, yet alert. Every twitch of a civilian's hand, every tremor of the buildings beneath her feet, drew her focus. She could feel the city's heartbeat, faltering, a subtle unease that she knew presaged the coming nightmare. High above, the cathedral bells tolled slowly, their deep notes echoing through empty streets and open plazas. A haunting rhythm that seemed to warn of a storm to come. Smoke drifted from distant forges, mingling with incense and the acrid tang of burning coals. Sister Superior paused atop a broad marble stairway, her eyes sweeping the streets below. There was movement where none should be, shadows twisting unnaturally along the walls. The edges of alleys darkened in ways that defied light. She clenched her fists around her bolter, feeling the cold weight like a lifeline. Whispers of unseen voices brushed against her mind, serpentine and sibilant, hinting at death and corruption. Even the air itself seemed heavier, thick with a tension that clawed at the lungs. Civilians began to shiver, clutching rosaries, murmuring prayers, and Sister Superior's heart tightened at the sight. She had seen this before in other cities, in other battles, an almost imperceptible signal that the warp and the horrors it spawned were stirring. A tremor rippled through the foundations of the cathedral, subtle but insistent, like the first beat of a monstrous heart awakening from a long slumber. The sisters tightened their formation, bolters raised, flamers casting an orange glow on scarred streets. Every instinct screamed that something vile approached, an unstoppable force born of hatred and chaos. And yet no sound accompanied it, only the oppressive presence pressing down from above and around. Sister Superior's gaze swept the skyline, noting distant clouds curling unnaturally, black smoke forming shapes that seemed almost alive, twisting toward the city as if smelling the fear within its walls. Her mind raced, cataloging threats, planning defenses, preparing for war, though the war had not yet fully begun. The citizens below moved with tentative caution, their prayers becoming frantic whispers, aware that something had shifted, but unaware that their lives were about to be shattered by a storm unlike any they had seen before. Sister Superior spoke softly to her sisters, a command threaded with steel and faith. Stay vigilant. The Emperor's light must not falter, no matter the darkness to come. Her voice was steady, yet beneath it lay the tension of a woman preparing to face unspeakable horrors. Shadows thickened along the edges of vision, the air shivering with anticipation, as though the world itself held its breath. Small tremors rocked the streets, dust falling from ancient stone. While the sunlight flickered against the clouds in fleeting bursts of illumination, revealing shapes that should not exist. The city, majestic and proud, seemed suddenly fragile, a porcelain vessel about to shatter under the weight of impending terror. Sister Superior's eyes hardened as she scanned the horizon once more, feeling the first prickling of dread deep in her bones. The calm, she realized, was a lie, a fleeting lull before chaos descended. Every nerve screamed warning, every shadow whispered of death, yet she braced herself and her sisters, ready to stand unyielding against whatever horror was about to awaken. The first scream ripped through the city like jagged steel, a sound so raw and human that it seemed to tear at the very soul of those who heard it. From the horizon, the forces of chaos surged, spilling over the streets in a tide of malice and mutation. Twisted abominations crawled from alleys and shadowed corners, flesh pulled and fused into grotesque shapes, claws snapping, eyes burning with unnatural light. Cultists chanted in guttural tones, their voices vibrating the stone foundations of buildings, summoning energies older than the Imperium itself. Demonic forms, hulking and terrible, shimmered with psychic fire, their horns scraping the sky as they advanced with deliberate, merciless intent. The air quivered with the raw power of the warp, and the city seemed to shrink under the oppressive weight of it. Smoke and ash filled the streets, mingling with the scent of burning flesh and scorched metal. Civilians ran blindly, screaming for mercy, while bolter fire and flamers clashed against the chaotic horde, illuminating the streets in fleeting bursts of violent orange and red. Imperial guards tried to form lines, but the chaos tide struck with overwhelming force. Bolter rounds tore into twisted limbs, only to be met by claws that could rend steel as easily as flesh. The ground shook as demonic champions stomped through streets, hurling walls aside and flattening barricades in seconds. Sister Superior's voice cut through the chaos, steel laced with faith. For the Emperor, hold the line. We fight alone if we must. The Sisters of Battle moved with calculated precision, flamers igniting malformed beasts, bolters scorching heretic flesh, chainswords cleaving through the unholy. Every corner, every alleyway became a crucible of fire and blood. Civilians cowered, trapped between advancing horrors and the desperate, brutal defense of the Sisters. Some fell, screaming as mutants tore them apart, while others were swept up by fleeing crowds into smoke-choked streets. The city's once proud architecture became a cage of terror, the Gothic spires now twisted silhouettes against a sky blackened by smoke and warp-tainted clouds. The Sisters' defense was relentless, yet the cost was monstrous. Comrades fell with horrific finality, their bodies torn, incinerated, or melted into the streets by demonic sorcery. Sister Superior moved from group to group, directing fire, saving civilians when she could, and striking down chaos spawn with a righteous fury that burned brighter than any flame. Bolters barked in unison with the screaming of the dying. Flamers sprayed holy fire into alleys where mutants lurked. Every kill demanded sacrifice. Every second brought new horrors. The air quaked with psychic resonance as a demonic warlord unleashed a torrent of warp energy, ripping apart stone and steel alike. Buildings shuddered and collapsed, sending clouds of ash into the streets, obscuring vision and adding to the sense of impending doom. Each moment stretched, the boundaries between life and death blurred, and the city itself seemed to weep under the weight of suffering. Yet Sister Superior pressed onward, moving like a shadow through the carnage, a grim beacon of defiance in a city that teetered on the edge of annihilation. The horde pressed closer, a tidal wave of malice threatening to sweep the city into oblivion. Sister Superior's squad fought with every ounce of strength, every prayer, and every ounce of faith they could muster. Flames roared down streets, Chainswords hummed with deadly precision, and bolters thundered. But even the most disciplined formations were tested to breaking point. Children screamed as mothers fell, cultists mocked the dying, and the screams of the condemned echoed through shattered cathedrals. The city was burning, screaming, dying. Yet amidst the chaos, Sister Superior raised her voice one final time. "Hold fast, the Emperor's light will not falter." Her words cut through the carnage like a sword, giving her sisters a sliver of hope, even as the shadows lengthened and twisted into shapes that seemed almost alive. Smoke, blood, and fire filled the air. But despite the overwhelming darkness, the Sisters of Battle stood their ground. And as the chaos tide pressed ever forward, the city's fate hung suspended on a knife edge, waiting for the first sparks of resistance to ignite the coming storm. The streets had become rivers of fire and blood, where every step threatened to be the last. Sister Superior led the Sisters of Battle through alleys strewn with rubble, bodies, and the twisted remnants of chaos spawn. Bolters thundered, chainswords hummed with lethal precision, and flamers roared, consuming the grotesque forms that leapt from the shadows. Mutants with malformed limbs and grinning faces lunged unpredictably, striking with inhuman speed. Daemons shimmered with psychic energy, their claws and teeth rending stone and flesh alike. Civilians screamed from shattered doorways, some crushed beneath debris, some caught between the sisters and the advancing horrors. Every strike the sisters delivered was matched by a surge of unholy violence, every victory soaked in blood and ash. Air hung heavy with the scent of scorched flesh, ozone, and despair, while the sky above churned with dark clouds that seemed to pulse with malevolent intent. The city itself groaned under the assault, ancient stones quivering as if mourning the lives being torn from it. Sister Superior moved relentlessly, bolter in hand, flamers cutting arcs of fire through the chaos, her eyes burning with unwavering focus. She saw comrades fall, screams etched into her mind, yet she pressed onward, shielding civilians where she could, striking down spawn with precise brutality. Her squad moved like a living wall of faith and fire, bolters spitting death, chainswords carving grotesque forms, flamers scorching the edges of warped corruption. Every corner revealed new horrors, tentacled mutants bursting from walls, demonic entities bending reality with psychic force, and corrupted humans lashing out in madness. The cries of the innocent pierced her heart as she fought, yet they also sharpened her resolve. She pressed forward, each step an act of defiance, each shot and swing a promise to the Emperor that this city would not fall without a fight. The line between life and death blurred as time seemed to stretch, and the streets themselves became a living nightmare, a crucible of fire, blood, and despair that tested every ounce of courage the sisters possessed. The sisters' formation fractured and reformed constantly, a desperate ballet of violence against an enemy that seemed infinite. Explosions ripped through streets, sending flaming debris raining down, as psychic blasts warped walls and tore open reality itself. Civilians huddled in fear, some pleading, some silent with shock, while Sister Superior's voice rose above the roar. "Hold the line! For the Emperor! Stand or die!" Every word was a blade against the chaos, galvanizing her sisters, even as the body count rose with horrific speed. Mutants fell in torrents, demons screamed and dissolved under fire. Yet for every enemy slain, more emerged from alleys, shadows, and the warp itself. The sisters fought in unison, their faith and discipline their only weapons against an army that had no conscience, no mercy. The city became a labyrinth of horror, echoing with the death cries of guards, civilians, and sisters alike. Yet even in the darkness, Sister Superior's resolve burned bright, a beacon of humanity amid the growing nightmare. The final surge of the initial clash came as Chaos champions emerged from the shadows, towering monstrosities wreathed in warp energy, their claws and teeth tearing through both stone and flesh. Sister Superior and her surviving squad met them with unflinching ferocity, chainswords and flamers slashing through warped flesh as bolters roared. Civilians were shoved to safety when possible, yet the screams of the injured filled the air like a symphony of agony. Buildings trembled and collapsed, dust choking vision, shadows moving in ways that made even the hardened sisters flinch. The city was partially overrun, streets slick with blood, fires raging uncontrollably, and smoke thickening into an almost tangible weight. Yet amidst the carnage, Sister Superior's defiance remained unbroken. She stood atop a pile of rubble, bolter smoking, chainsword raised, eyes blazing with the Emperor's wrath. The initial clash had ended, leaving the city scarred, sisters bloodied but unbowed, and the first wave of chaos halted, if only for a moment. The survivors caught their breath, knowing the true horror had only just begun, and the darkness looming over the city promised that the battle for the Imperium had only just ignited. The Sisters of Battle retreated through streets choked with smoke and debris, every step a struggle over rubble and the broken bodies of civilians and guards. Fires cast grotesque shadows along shattered buildings, and the stench of blood and death hung heavy in the air. Sister Superior led her battered squad toward the towering cathedral, its walls scarred but still standing as a bastion against the encroaching darkness. Each sister moved with exhaustion etched into every motion, yet their resolve remained unbroken. Civilians stumbled behind them, trembling, some crying for lost family, others too terrified to speak. The air was tense, each distant shriek or crash a reminder that chaos pursued them relentlessly. Even in retreat, Sister Superior's mind raced with strategy, assessing barricades, exit routes, and the few remaining defensible positions within the cathedral. The grand doors loomed ahead like a promise of sanctuary, yet the shadows seemed to whisper that no walls could keep the horrors at bay forever. Inside the cathedral, the sisters tended to the wounded, bolters still clutched in hands that shook with fatigue and grief. Fires from overturned lamps cast flickering light on the faces of civilians, huddled in corners, their eyes wide with terror. Sister Superior moved among them, offering quiet words of comfort while scanning for signs of chaos infiltrators. Her voice was steady, but inside, doubts gnawed at her. Was their strength enough? Could they truly hold the cathedral against the relentless onslaught? The wounded groaned, sisters whispered prayers, and civilians clung to hope like fragile threads. The massive stone walls, adorned with statues of angels and saints, seemed suddenly fragile under the weight of the outside chaos. The cathedral's silence was deceptive, punctuated by distant explosions and the faint, chilling hum of warp energies that hinted at the horrors advancing through the streets. The sense of urgency was palpable. Every moment spent here was a moment closer to catastrophe. As barricades were reinforced and flamers prepared, the first Chaos minions breached the cathedral's perimeter. Twisted forms smashed through side entrances, muttering prayers to gods of destruction, their claws tearing wood and stone with ease. The sisters responded with brutal efficiency, bolters roaring, chainswords cleaving through malformed limbs, and flamers igniting twisted flesh. Civilians screamed, some trapped in the crossfire, and Sister Superior dove repeatedly into harm's way to protect them. Each kill, Each moment of defense was soaked in blood, and yet every victory came with losses. Sisters fell with faces frozen in horror. Civilians died clutching at nothing, and the weight of despair pressed heavily on the survivors. Sister Superior's eyes caught a glimpse of something more terrifying than the minions, a chaos champion, towering and wreathed in psychic fire, moving deliberately toward the cathedral's inner sanctum. Her heart froze. If this monstrosity reached the Emperor, the Imperium itself could fall. She barked orders, directing her sisters to hold the line, knowing that the coming siege would demand every ounce of faith, courage, and brutality they possessed. The cathedral shook as the chaos assault intensified, each impact sending vibrations through the stone floors and stained glass windows. Civilians cried out, their voices mingling with the roars of the sisters and the unholy screams of the demonic invaders. Sister Superior moved among her warriors, inspiring them to push forward despite exhaustion and grief. The sisters' coordinated defense created fleeting pockets of safety amidst the chaos, but the sound of splintering wood and crushing stone reminded them that the walls could not hold forever. Every corner of the cathedral became a battlefield, every altar and pillar a potential trap or refuge. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, the sisters' resolve burned like a beacon. As the first wave of chaos retreated after heavy losses, a grim realization settled over them. The real battle was only beginning. Beyond the walls, the city burned and writhed under the horde's advance, and within, every breath of hope was tempered by the knowledge that the cathedral would soon face a siege unlike any the Imperium had endured. The assault began with a roar that shook the cathedral to its foundations. Chaos forces, more numerous and grotesque than ever, surged through streets and alleys, their forms twisted, mutated, and dripping with malevolent energy. Demonic banners whipped in the wind as cultists screamed prayers to gods of destruction, their voices raw and grating against stone walls. The Sisters of Battle met them with unyielding fury, flamers roaring, bolters thundering, chainswords cleaving through the grotesque shapes that lunged from shadows. Fires ignited in bursts, illuminating the battlefield in flashes of orange and red, revealing civilians caught between the Sisters' defense and the advancing horrors. Blood sprayed across marble floors and shattered pews, mingling with smoke and dust. Sister Superior moved with lethal grace, directing her warriors to hold every corridor, every altar, every nook against the endless tide. The air was thick with heat, despair, and the stench of charred flesh, and every breath felt heavy with the weight of impending death. Chaos showed no restraint, each wave more horrifying than the last. Mutants hurled themselves into the barricades with unnatural strength, while daemons bent reality with psychic powers, tearing through walls and ceilings as though they were paper. Civilians screamed in terror, as some were corrupted on the spot, their flesh twisting, bones snapping, becoming living weapons wielded against the sisters themselves. Every defensive strike required brutal efficiency, yet every victory was stained with the blood of comrades and innocents. Sister Superior's heart ached at each loss, yet her resolve hardened. She roared commands, repositioning her sisters with precision, moving wounded civilians to safer zones, and striking down corrupted innocents with tears burning her face. Each act of defense carried a cost, and the cathedral became a theater of nightmare and fire, echoing with shrieks, explosions, and the metallic scent of blood. The siege had begun, and every second counted as the forces of chaos advanced with relentless malice. In the chaos, Sister Superior glimpsed the true threat, a chaos champion, a towering monstrosity wreathed in psychic fire, moving deliberately toward the inner sanctum of the cathedral. Its eyes burned with intelligence and malice, assessing the defenses and calculating the quickest path to its target. Her stomach tightened as she realized the stakes. If this champion reached the Emperor or the holy relics within, the Imperium could fall. She barked orders with unshakable authority, directing flamers to create walls of fire, bolters to focus volleys, and sisters to form defensive wedges against the tide. The sisters fought with ruthless precision, chainswords cleaving, bolters spitting death, flamers reducing spawn to ash. Civilians clung to safety wherever possible, some screaming, some silent, eyes wide with terror, while others were caught in the crossfire. Every corner became a crucible of death and heroism, a horrifying ballet where courage met unrelenting evil. Despite the sisters' skill, the losses were staggering. Sisters fell with faces frozen in pain and horror. Civilians were slaughtered or corrupted, and even bolstered barricades gave way under sheer force. Fires consumed pews, stained glass shattered under psychic blasts, and the cathedral's vaulted ceilings trembled under the relentless assault. Yet even amidst despair, Sister Superior inspired a flicker of hope, guiding her sisters through narrow passages, striking from shadows and ensuring the enemy never fully breached the inner sanctum. Each strike was a prayer, every kill an offering to the Emperor. Yet the champion advanced, its presence a palpable shadow of dread. Smoke, fire, and blood filled the air, but the sisters' defiance burned brighter, a beacon against the ever-thickening darkness. The assault intensified, and though the tide seemed unending, Sister Superior's resolve refused to waver, knowing that the fate of the Imperium itself hung on their unyielding courage. The cathedral had become a battlefield of despair and heroism, every corridor a nightmare, where screams of the dying mingled with the roar of bolters and the hiss of flamers. Amid the chaos, Sister Superior moved with unyielding purpose, her eyes scanning for civilians trapped in the crossfire. She found a small boy, bloodied and crying, pinned beneath debris as flames licked the walls around them. Ignoring the searing heat and the muttered growls of demonic creatures closing in, she hoisted the child into her arms, bolter slung across her shoulder, and ran through the smoke-choked hallways. Her sisters covered her advance with furious gunfire, tearing apart mutants and corrupted civilians alike. Each step was a testament to faith and defiance, yet every movement reminded her of the price of their courage. The child's sobs echoed in her ears, mingling with screams and the metallic tang of blood, a cruel reminder of the horrors that had already consumed so many. Despite the narrow victories, the weight of grief pressed upon every sister of battle. They mourned comrades fallen in the assault, their faces etched with pain and determination as they fought to continue the defense. Civilians, some broken and terrified, others stoic in the face of unimaginable violence, clung to hope that the sisters' presence meant survival. Each sister bore the mental scars of witnessing slaughter, yet each also carried the fierce determination to protect even one life if it meant standing against the darkness. Sister Superior moved between barricades, offering quick words of reassurance, her voice steady, even as the cathedral walls trembled under repeated psychic blasts. The sense of urgency was ever present. If the Chaos Champion broke through to the inner sanctum, the Imperium's faith, and perhaps its survival, would be at risk. Every second counted, and every breath was heavy with the knowledge that one misstep could doom them all. In the midst of the fray, moments of humanity flickered like fragile flames. Sister Amara, barely clinging to consciousness after a savage wound to her leg, threw herself between a corrupted civilian wielding a jagged weapon and a terrified mother shielding her child. Her chainsword roared through the air, striking down the monster with a brutal precision born of desperation and devotion. Civilians, witnessing these acts of courage, began to cling to hope, eyes wide with both terror and awe. Sister Superior's gaze caught the Chaos Champion again, its massive form pulsing with psychic energy, its eyes fixed with malevolent intelligence on the cathedral's heart. She knew it was only a matter of time before it would reach the Emperor or sacred relics. Every sister gritted her teeth, steeling herself against fear, knowing that the battle demanded courage beyond normal human endurance. The air was thick with blood, smoke, and the cries of the innocent, yet the sisters' defiance shone brighter than the darkness encroaching on every side. The final moments of this act surged with tension as the Chaos Champion breached the cathedral's outer defenses, its immense claws tearing stone and flesh alike. Sister Superior roared commands to her sisters, forming a desperate defensive line, bolters firing, flamers igniting the twisted forms of mutants, and chainswords slashing in perfect unison. Civilians were pushed toward hidden alcoves, some screaming, some silently praying. As the champion's shadow darkened the vaulted ceilings, the cathedral trembled, walls cracking under the psychic assault, and the air shimmered with unholy energy. Each sister fought with every ounce of strength, every shred of faith and fury. Yet even as the battle raged, a grim understanding settled over them. The champion's arrival marked a turning point, and the cathedral's fate now balanced on a knife edge. Smoke, fire, blood, and horror filled every corner, and amidst it all, Sister Superior's eyes burned with unshakable determination, knowing that only their courage and sacrifice could stave off annihilation. The siege had begun in earnest, and the next moments would decide the fate of every soul within the Imperium's sacred walls. The cathedral trembled as the Chaos Champion advanced, massive claws rending stone and flesh, psychic energy crackling around its warped form. Sister Superior stepped forward, her ceramite armor scorched and scarred, bolter held high, chainsword gleaming in the flickering firelight. Around her, the remaining Sisters of Battle formed a tight formation, eyes ablaze with faith and determination. With a fierce cry, Sister Superior led the charge, bolters spitting fire and flamers roaring, the sound of death merging with the screams of the dying and the roaring of fire. Civilians scrambled to safer alcoves, clutching children, but their eyes followed the sisters, a fragile hope flickering amidst despair. The battlefield became a maelstrom of violence, stone shattering under blows, blood spraying in violent arcs, and the air thick with smoke, ash, and the iron scent of life spilling onto marble floors. The sisters fought with unrelenting ferocity, every swing of a chainsword, every bolt fired, a testament to unwavering loyalty and devotion to the Emperor. Demonic limbs were torn apart in bursts of flame, cultists shredded by precise bolter fire. Yet the champion's psychic attacks warped reality around them, twisting shadows into claws and tendrils that reached from walls and floors. Sister Superior moved fluidly among her sisters, rallying them when exhaustion threatened to break their formation, striking down spawn that breached their line, and guiding the wounded to safety while never faltering in combat. Each sister became a whirlwind of steel and fire, carving through unholy flesh, bolters echoing like the Emperor's judgment, chainswords slicing through the warp-tainted horrors that sought to annihilate them. The cathedral's stained glass shattered under psychic shockwaves, the colorless sky casting an ominous glow on the slaughter below. Amid the chaos, the cost of defiance became horrifyingly clear. Several sisters fell heroically, bolters still clutched in frozen hands, chainswords embedded in demonic flesh, as civilians watched in terrified awe. Their deaths were not in vain. They cleared the path for others to push forward, giving Sister Superior a momentary advantage to confront the Chaos Champion directly. She leapt, chainsword swinging in a blur, flames igniting the champion's twisted flesh. Bolter rounds puncturing its hide, psychic energy meeting faith-driven steel. Civilians huddled behind shattered pews, trembling as the clash escalated, yet some dared to cheer quietly, sensing the first glimmers of hope in an ocean of horror. Every movement, every strike, carried the weight of lives, faith, and the future of the Imperium itself. The sisters' charge, though costly, had pierced the darkness, and the tide, long oppressive and suffocating, began to show the first cracks of reversal. The fight reached fevered intensity as Sister Superior and her remaining sisters pushed the Chaos Champion back through corridors of fire and debris. Smoke choked vision, fire cast grotesque shadows that seemed almost alive, and psychic energy warped the air with each movement of the monstrosity. Yet with every strike, every scream of battle, the sisters' faith fueled their fury, their courage becoming almost tangible. Sister Superior's eyes burned with righteous wrath, every blow a declaration that the Emperor's light would not be extinguished. Civilians, some clutching rosaries, others wide-eyed in fear, whispered prayers as the sisters' defiance held, feeling a momentary surge of hope amid the nightmare. The cathedral, battered and scarred, stood as a symbol of unyielding faith, even as stone crumbled and blood pooled at every corner. As the Chaos Champion recoiled under the sisters' relentless assault, it became clear. The balance of the battle had shifted, however precariously. The Chaos Champion stumbled under the sisters' relentless assault, but its psychic energy flared violently, sending shockwaves that cracked stone and threw debris across the cathedral. Sister Superior knew that brute force alone would not be enough to stop it. With her sisters holding the line, she climbed onto a shattered altar, her hands raised to the heavens, chanting a sacred invocation to the Emperor. Bolts of pure faith and energy emanated from her armor, igniting a golden aura that spread outward, burning away the corruption in her path. Her voice rang over the din of battle, unwavering, filling every heart with hope and defiance. Flames from her bolter and chainsword carved through twisted flesh, yet it was her ritual, her unyielding faith, that began to unbalance the chaos forces. The air hummed with power, the screams of the demonic twisted under the Emperor's judgment, and even the monstrous champion faltered, staggering as the sisters pressed their advantage with newfound. The battlefield transformed as the sisters, inspired by Sister Superior's act, fought with a renewed vigor that bordered on supernatural. Bolters roared in unison, chainswords cleaved through warped flesh, and flamers ignited corridors in controlled, purifying fury. Civilians peeked from hiding places, their fear mingled with cautious hope as they witnessed the tide beginning to turn. Some of the sisters, exhausted and bloodied, fell under the weight of their injuries, their sacrifices creating gaps in the chaos lines that allowed others to strike decisively. Sister Superior moved among them, lending strength, shouting encouragement, and guiding survivors to safety. Every act of courage, every life saved, became a thread in the fragile tapestry of hope, knitting together resistance against the overwhelming darkness that had threatened to consume them all. The Chaos Champion roared in fury, psychic energy warping reality in jagged waves. But Sister Superior's aura of faith acted as a shield, deflecting psychic attacks and weakening the monstrosity's hold over the cathedral. Her sisters surged forward, their courage unshakable, cutting down cultists, mutants, and daemons alike. Smoke and blood mingled in the air, and fires painted the scene in an infernal glow. Yet the determination of the sisters carved a path of light through the darkness. Civilians, some clutching children, began to quietly cheer, their voices small but piercing against the roar of battle. For a brief, precious moment, the horror of the cathedral gave way to the triumph of human courage, as the chaos forces faltered under the combined might of faith, loyalty, and unwavering resolve. Each sister fought not only for survival, but to honor those lost, to protect the innocent, and to uphold the Emperor's light against the shadow that sought to consume all. The final moments of this act blended horror with hope. The Chaos Champion faltered completely, staggering beneath the combined assault of bolters, chainswords, flames, and Sister Superior's sacred invocation. Smoke and fire swirled around the cathedral. Stained glass shattered, and walls crumbled, yet the sisters' line held firm. Civilians huddled in alcoves, whispered prayers, tears streaking their soot-covered faces, while the surviving sisters stood resolute, battered but unbroken. Sister Superior, her armor scorched and body trembling, lowered her hands slowly as the golden aura receded, leaving the remaining Chaos minions disoriented and faltering. The tide had turned, the Emperor's blessing had weakened the enemy, and for the first time, a fragile hope flickered in the cathedral's heart. Yet even as cheers echoed softly, the battle's cost weighed heavily on all present. A stark reminder that victory came at the price of blood, sacrifice, and unwavering faith. The cathedral shook violently as the surviving forces of chaos surged for a final assault, led by the battered but still terrifying Chaos Champion. Smoke and embers filled the air, while flaming debris fell from shattered arches, turning the battlefield into a maze of fire and shadow. Sister Superior, standing atop the altar's shattered steps, raised her chainsword and bolter, eyes blazing with unrelenting faith. Around her, the remaining Sisters of Battle formed a disciplined line, bolters firing in synchronized volleys, flamers spitting fire in arcs that cut through waves of daemons, while every corridor and alcove became a crucible of relentless violence. Psychic blasts tore through corrupted flesh, knocking demonic entities off their feet, yet the champion pressed forward with a terrifying intelligence, anticipating every strike, every maneuver. Civilians huddled in alcoves, trembling, their eyes wide with fear and hope, witnessing the apex of both horror and heroism unfold. The clash escalated into brutal close-quarters combat as the champion collided with the sisters' defenses. Chainswords met warped claws with shrieks of tearing metal and flesh. Bolters spat death at unholy forms, and flamers consumed mutated horrors in waves of cleansing fire. Each swing, each shot, was a desperate attempt to push back the encroaching chaos while preserving what little hope remained. Sister Superior leapt into the fray, striking the champion with a precision born of desperation and faith. Sparks flew as Ceramite collided with demonic armor, fire and psychic energy illuminating the grotesque forms in the cathedral's ruined interior. The screams of both humans and daemons echoed, mingling with the roar of weapons, and the walls seemed to shudder under the sheer intensity of violence. Every second was a test of courage and resolve, and every blow carried the weight of countless lives and the future of the Imperium itself. Amidst the carnage, sisters fell heroically, bolters still clutched in frozen hands, flamers still blazing, chainswords embedded in demonic flesh. Civilians were pushed to safety whenever possible, but the battlefield was merciless. Sister Superior's voice rose above the chaos, commanding, inspiring, and defying the darkness with a strength that seemed almost superhuman. The Chaos Champion lashed out with psychic force, shattering columns, igniting fires, and tearing apart anything that dared stand in its path. Yet the sisters pressed on, striking at vulnerable spots, combining precision and raw, faith-driven fury. With every death of a comrade, the remaining sisters fought harder, their grief transformed into righteous wrath. The champion faltered slightly, wincing under the repeated assault, and Sister Superior seized the opportunity, directing a final, devastating combination of bolter fire, chainsword strikes, and psychic invocations. The climax approached as Sister Superior engaged the Chaos Champion directly, every movement a deadly dance of fury and faith. Bolter rounds slammed into its twisted flesh, chainsword slashed through warped sinew, and psychic energy met unyielding will in bursts of blinding light. The champion retaliated with crushing blows, psychic shockwaves, and claws that tore stone and steel alike. But the sisters' relentless coordination and Sister Superior's singular courage proved unstoppable. Flames, smoke, and blood filled the cathedral, turning the fight into a scene of apocalyptic horror and cinematic brutality. Civilians watched with wide, tear-filled eyes as the champion staggered, roared, and finally fell under the combined might of faith, sacrifice, and sheer determination. Its death sent a shockwave through the remaining Chaos forces, scattering them in disarray, their morale shattered against the indomitable spirit of the sisters. As silence slowly descended, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the distant crackle of fires, the battlefield lay littered with corpses. Sisters, Marines, civilians, and daemons alike. The chaos had been purged, but the cost was immense. Sister Superior staggered through the debris, bolter smoking, chainsword dripping with blood, eyes scanning for survivors. Around her, the surviving sisters tended to the wounded, gathered the dead, and formed a solemn line of honor and respect. Civilians, many crying, many in shock, emerged from hiding, witnessing both devastation and the bravery that had preserved them. The Chaos Champion and its minions were defeated. The immediate threat ended, but the echoes of sacrifice and horror lingered heavily in every heart. Despite the ruin, a fragile sense of hope began to take root, seeded by courage, faith, and the unbroken will of humanity. The cathedral was a ruin of fire, smoke, and shattered stone, littered with the bodies of sisters, Marines, civilians, and the twisted remnants of chaos. Silence pressed heavily upon the survivors, broken only by distant groans of the wounded and the crackle of dying fires. Sister Superior moved carefully through the debris, her armor scorched and bloodied, chainsword lowered, bolter clutched, eyes scanning for anyone still alive. Around her, the remaining sisters tended to the injured, offering what comfort they could, voices low but firm with reassurance. Civilians, trembling, stumbled forward from hiding, clutching children, their faces etched with grief, terror, and gratitude. The true cost of the battle became painfully clear. Every survivor carried the memory of friends, comrades, and family, lost to the horrors unleashed. Yet amidst the devastation, a quiet resilience began to stir, an understanding that survival had come not through luck, but through courage, faith. The Sisters of Battle moved with somber purpose, gathering bodies and laying them in temporary honor, marking the fallen with prayers and ritual gestures. Tears streaked through soot and ash as Sister Superior knelt beside those who had given everything, whispering blessings to the dead. Civilians joined where they could, helping to clear rubble, tending wounds, and offering what meager aid they were able. The air was thick with grief, yet it also carried a fragile sense of victory, a recognition that despite unimaginable horror, the Imperium had endured. Sister Superior's voice rose above the murmurs, calm but resolute, reminding all that the Emperor's light endured because courage never falters. Every surviving sister felt the weight of sacrifice, the burden of duty, but also a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that their actions had preserved not just lives, but faith itself. Reconstruction began amidst the ruin, slow and painstaking, yet driven by unwavering resolve. Survivors cleared streets, rebuilt barricades, and tended the wounded, each act a small rebellion against the darkness that had threatened to consume them. Sister Superior guided the effort, her presence a symbol of unbroken spirit, inspiring even the weakest to stand and continue. Civilians whispered their gratitude, their fear tempered by awe at the courage displayed. Stories of heroism spread quickly among the survivors, tales of sisters throwing themselves between daemons and innocents, of bolter fire and chainsword strikes holding back the unholy tide. Each story became a thread in the fabric of hope, weaving a narrative that even amidst horror and loss, humanity endured through bravery and faith. In the final moments, Sister Superior stood atop the cathedral steps, looking over the city still smoldering but saved, a grim yet hopeful landscape stretching before her. The Emperor's light seemed to shine faintly through smoke and ash, a reminder that faith and courage were more powerful than even the darkest of forces. Civilians began to emerge from hiding, offering quiet cheers, small gestures of hope, and tearful smiles, while the surviving sisters tightened their formation, ever vigilant, aware that the fight against darkness never truly ended. The fallen were honored, the injured tended, and the city slowly began to breathe again. And as the camera, or perspective, pulled back from the battered cathedral to the wider city, a final narration echoed, "The Emperor's light endures, because courage never falters." Smoke drifted into the sky, flames dwindled. But the grim yet hopeful truth remained. The Imperium survived, saved by faith, bravery, and the unwavering spirit of the sister.